Do you know where these paintings are? They are worth $500 million, and they disappeared 30 years ago. If you find them, you will receive a reward of $10 million. But let's go back to the beginning, to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, a sanctuary where works by Rembrandt, Vermeer, and Degas sleep under the protection of two poorly paid guards. Two men in Boston police uniforms enter, thick mustaches. One of them wears gold-rimmed glasses, and he says dramatically, "Gentlemen, this is a robbery. There is an absurd number of suspects. Boston was a Wild West. Boston's underworld was desperate. Lawyers cost fortunes. Bail amounts were astronomical. And there was something the mobsters needed more than money, a free pass to get out of prison. There were 13 works stolen, the most important, The Storm on the Sea of Galilee. The only seascape by Rembrandt in history. This is a scandal not only locally, but across the entire international scene. The works could be anywhere, Asia, Middle East, South America, the entire world. But what is most impactful? 35 years have already passed and the frames remain empty on the museum walls. The largest art theft in history remains unsolved. To understand what was lost, it is necessary to understand who built it. Isabella Stewart Gardner was born on April 14, 1840, in New York, daughter of textile and iron merchants who built a fortune during the American expansion. At age 20, she married John Lowell Gardner Jr., heir to one of the oldest families in Boston, the Brahmins, the Protestant aristocracy of New England. Boston did not accept her. Isabella was loud, eccentric. She wore diamonds to baseball games. She walked lions on leashes along Beacon Street. Once, she appeared at a symphony wearing a headband that said, "Oh, you Red Sox." Boston high society considered her vulgar, a New York intruder trying to buy her way into the closed circle of families who considered themselves the American nobility. But it was tragedy that transformed her. In 1863, Isabella gave birth to her only child, John Lowell Gardner III, called Jackie. In 1865, Jackie died of pneumonia. He was only 2 years old. Isabella never recovered. Doctors diagnosed her with nervous exhaustion. Her husband took her to Europe, hoping the change of scenery would cure her. What he did not expect was that Europe would awaken in her an insatiable hunger, the hunger for beauty. She began to collect. In the following decades, Isabella traveled across Europe buying art. She developed a trained eye. She surrounded herself with the greatest specialists of the time, including the young historian Bernard Berenson, who became her personal advisor. Berenson guided her through the decadent palaces of Europe. Bankrupt aristocracies needed money. Isabella had it. She bought what centuries of European nobility had accumulated: Rembrandts, Titians, Botticellis, Raphaels. She paid $600,000 for The Rape of Europa by Titian. At the time, the highest amount ever paid for a painting brought to the United States. When John died in 1898, Isabella had an incomparable collection and an ambitious plan. She would buy land in the Fenway district and build a Venetian palazzo in the heart of Boston. Not a gallery, an entire world. Construction of Fenway Court began in 1899. Isabella supervised every detail. She imported columns, capitals, and architectural fragments directly from Venice. She hired Italian craftsmen. She ordered flowers from the Mediterranean to be planted in the central courtyard. When the doors opened on January 1st, 1903, guests entered what looked like a hallucination, a complete Renaissance palazzo with a 4-story courtyard covered by glass, full of orchids, nasturtiums, and jasmines, surrounded by galleries where Dutch masters looked at American visitors across the centuries. Isabella lived on the 4th floor of the museum until her death on July 17, 1924. Her will contained a strict clause: the collection must remain permanently for the education and enjoyment of the public. Nothing could be moved, added, or altered. If the arrangement of the works were changed, the entire collection would be sold and the money donated to Harvard. She wanted her world to survive intact, eternally. For 66 years, it survived. While the museum remained frozen in time, Boston was boiling. The city had always maintained a symbiotic relationship with organized crime. Since Prohibition, Italian and Irish families controlled rackets, extortion, and drug trafficking. But in 1990, that balance was collapsing. The Patriarca family had dominated organized crime in New England since the 1950s. Raymond L.S. Patriarca, the original patriarch, ruled for 3 decades with an iron fist. His headquarters were in Providence, Rhode Island, but his reach extended from Connecticut to Maine, with Boston as a crucial territory. Patriarca died in 1984. His son, Raymond Patriarca Jr., inherited the crown, but Jr. lacked both the charisma and the brutality of his father. The power vacuum triggered a civil war. 2 factions emerged. On one side, the loyalists of Frank Cadillac Frank Salem, a veteran who had served 16 years in prison. On the other, a coalition of Boston captains led by J.R. Russo and Vincent D. Ferrara, who challenged Providence's authority. The war was bloody. Between 1989 and 1991, dozens of mobsters were murdered on the streets of Boston. Bodies appeared in car trunks in East Boston. Men vanished after dinners in North End restaurants. But the real catastrophe came from the federal government. In March 1990, the Department of Justice launched a devastating offensive. Federal prosecutors indicted dozens of high-ranking mob figures. The timing was surgical. Just weeks before the Gardner robbery, the FBI arrested 21 members of the Patriarca family, including the head of the Boston faction. Boston's underworld was desperate. Lawyers cost fortunes. Bail was astronomical. And there was something mobsters needed more than money: leverage. In the Underworld Code, stolen works of art are not admired. They are used. They are collateral for black market loans. They are bargaining chips with prosecutors. A Rembrandt is worth more as a VIP pass out of prison than hanging on a wall. The theory the FBI would later develop holds that the Gardner robbery was not a crime of opportunity. It was an act of calculated desperation, an operation commissioned, or at least sanctioned, by organized crime to create leverage for negotiation. The timing of the robbery at the height of federal pressure and internal chaos was no coincidence. Security at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in 1990 was a cruel joke. The museum had no video cameras. The motion sensors were infrared, designed to detect presence, not record images. There was no external monitoring. There were no armed guards. The only connection to the outside world was a telephone and a silent panic button behind the security desk. The guards were paid just above minimum wage. They received no meaningful training. They were, in essence, night watchmen guarding a $500 million collection. On the night of March 17 to 18, 1990, 2 men were on duty. Richard Rick Abath was 23 years old. He was a musician, a former Berklee College of Music student who had dropped out. He played in a band. He wore long, curly hair. He described himself as a hippie. The museum job was a night gig, low pay, quiet hours, time to think. His partner was Randy Heston, 25, less experienced and subordinate to Abath's decisions. The night began normally. The museum closed at 5 p.m. The guards made their rounds. The city was celebrating St. Patrick's Day. At approximately 12:54 a.m., something strange happened. Security records show that Abath opened the side door on Palace Road. Briefly, seconds. He would later claim he was merely checking whether it was locked. This moment remains one of the most controversial points in the case. Was it a routine check, or was it a signal to someone waiting in the darkness? Jeffrey Kelly, the FBI agent who led the investigation for 22 years, has no doubts. In March 2025, after his retirement, Kelly told the Boston Globe, "I am convinced that Abath was involved." The circumstantial evidence is troubling. Abath had given his 2-week notice shortly before the robbery. Motion sensors show that one of the thieves entered the Blue Room, an area Abath covered alone, to steal only a single painting, Chez Tortoni by Manet. The frame was later found on the security director's chair, as if it had been deliberately left there. Abath denied involvement until the day of his death in 2024. He was 57 years old. "1:24 a.m., the door opens. The two men enter the security vestibule. Museum protocol requires that nighttime visitors be trapped between two doors, a human trap, while their identity is verified. Abath does not follow the protocol. The taller thief invents a story about an arrest warrant. Abbas steps out from behind the desk, moving away from the panic button. He is handcuffed. Minutes later, Randy Heston comes downstairs and is also restrained. "Gentlemen, this is a robbery." The guards are taken to the basement. Underground, the brutality becomes tactile. The thieves use rolls of gray industrial duct tape. Abath is handcuffed to a workbench. His head is completely wrapped in tape, leaving only a small opening to breathe. Heston is taken to a separate area, handcuffed to a steam pipe, also blindfolded. Above them, the greatest art heist in American history is just beginning. With the guards neutralized, the thieves have the entire museum at their disposal. The infrared motion sensors were not deactivated. They record the criminals' steps like digital ghosts, allowing the choreography of the heist to be reconstructed minute by minute. What the data reveals is disturbing. The thieves did not run. They did not act with the frantic rush of someone fearing the arrival of the police. They remained in the building for 81 minutes. For context, most art thefts last less than 5 minutes. These men had time. They had confidence. They knew no one was coming. 1:48, the thieves enter the Dutch room on the second floor. This space, with its walls covered in green fabric and windows overlooking the internal courtyard, houses the crown jewels. Here, the appreciation of art gives way to physical violence. The thieves are not experts. They do not carry precision tools. They are brutes. The Storm on the Sea of Galilee by Rembrandt, painted in 1633, is the first victim. It is the only seascape the Dutch master produced in his entire career. The painting is large, the frame heavy. Frustrated with the mounting system, the thieves shatter the protective glass. The shards fall onto the tiled floor and the oriental rug. Using box cutters, they roughly slash the canvas right against the frame. The sound of 17th century linen being ripped echoes in the silence of the room. Pieces of the painting's border remain attached to the wood. The Concert by Johannes Vermeer is next, a work of intimacy and light painted around 1664. There are only 34 known Vermeer paintings in the entire world. This one is valued today at over $250 million. It is ripped from its frame with the same lack of ceremony. Rembrandt's Elysian Gentleman in Black is brutally cut out. Gover Flink's Landscape with an Obelisk is stolen, possibly because the thieves believed it to be another Rembrandt. The style is similar, the signature old. Rembrandt's self-portrait etching, little bigger than a postage stamp, is also removed. The thieves cross the Raphael room and reach the short gallery. The focus shifts from Dutch oils to paper and bronze. They force open a cabinet and remove 5 works on paper by Edgar Degas, sketches of horses and jockeys. Fragile, smaller, easy to conceal. And then, the strangest item of all, the Napoleonic eagle. Atop Étoile, silk banner of Napoleon's Imperial Guard, was a gilded bronze eagle finial. The thieves try, incredibly, to take the entire banner. They struggle with the screws. They fail. In an act of frustration or opportunism, they break off the eagle finial and take it. They leave behind the historic banner. This item of infinitely lower monetary value than the Rembrandts suggests something disturbing. Were the thieves following a specific order list? One of the thieves goes down to the first floor. In the blue room, he ignores priceless works to focus on a single piece. Chez Tortoni by Edouard Manet, a small portrait of a gentleman in a top hat. The frame is not left in the room. It is later found on the security director's chair at the entrance. The last piece to be processed before the escape. The sensors record long periods of inactivity. There were moments when no movement was detected for over 10 minutes. What were they doing? Resting? Admiring the loot? The most disturbing question, why did they leave behind what they did? Titian's The Rape of Europa was on the 3rd floor, considered by many the most important painting in the museum, one of the most valuable in the United States. Even on the 2nd floor, works by Raphael and Botticelli were ignored. The most accepted conclusion, the thieves were laborers following a list. Common criminals attracted by recognizable names like Rembrandt and gold like the eagle finial. with no real knowledge of art history. 2:45. The side door opens for the last time. The thieves make 2 trips to load the car, and then they disappear into the Boston fog. They take 13 objects with them. They leave behind empty frames, broken glass, and 2 men tied up in the basement. The robbery, estimated value of the heist, $500 million. The FBI investigation, spanning more than 3 decades, is a labyrinth of dead ends, dubious informants, and convenient deaths. Initial suspicion inevitably falls on Rick Abath. The circumstantial evidence is troubling. The inexplicable opening of the side door minutes before the thieves arrived. The violation of protocol by opening the door to police officers without verification. The advance notice given shortly before the crime. The FBI interrogates Abath repeatedly, puts his life under a microscope, monitors his finances. Nothing. There is no evidence of sudden wealth, no proven connection to organized crime. Abath is never charged. He will spend the rest of his life under the shadow of suspicion. In 2024, Rick Abath dies at 57. Months later, Jeffrey Kelly, the FBI agent who led the investigation for 22 years, publicly declares, "I am convinced that Abath was involved." The truth died with him. The FBI's main focus consolidates around a criminal cell based in Dorchester, a Boston neighborhood. The TRC Auto Electric Repair Shop becomes the epicenter of the investigation. Carmelo Merlino is the first name, a cocaine trafficker, mob associate connected to Frank Salem. The FBI believes Merlino organized the robbery, intending to use the artworks as bargaining chips. The executors, George Reisfelder and Leonard "Lenny" DiMuzio, both match the guards' descriptions: height, age, physical build. There is a problem. Both are dead. DiMuzio disappeared in April 1991. His body was found in June, in the trunk of a car in East Boston, gunshots to the head. Reisfelder died in July 1991, intravenous heroin overdose. Death considered suspicious by investigators. Relatives of Reisfelder told the FBI they saw a painting of a man in a top hat, similar to Chez Tortoni, on the wall of his apartment after the robbery. When his body was found, the painting was gone. James, Marks, and Robert Donati, other associates, also died violently in the following months. Jeffrey Kelly told the Boston Globe, "The deaths of Reisfelder, DiMuzio, Marks, and Donati within 18 months of the robbery had a paralyzing effect on the investigation. Someone was eliminating witnesses or recovering the art, or both." The FBI theory holds that the art became radioactive, too hot to keep in Boston. The hypothetical chain of custody: the art passed from Merlino to Robert "Bobby" Guarente, a mobster who moved to Maine. Guarente, already ill, allegedly handed the works to Robert Gentile, a low-level mobster in Connecticut. In 2010, Guarente's widow told the FBI she saw her husband hand paintings to Gentile in Portland, Maine. The hunt for Gentile became an obsession. During searches of Gentile's home, the FBI found a list of the stolen works with estimated values. They found a newspaper clipping about the robbery, but they did not find the paintings. In 2016, the FBI conducted a massive search of Gentile's property. They used ground-penetrating radar. They found a secret compartment beneath a false floor. It was empty. Robert Gentile died in September 2021. He took the secret to the grave. There is one man, still alive, whom the FBI believes knows where the paintings are. David Turner was an associate of Merlino. In 1999, he was arrested in an FBI sting, sentenced to 38 years. In 2019, he was released. He never revealed the whereabouts of the works. Turner does not talk. "35 years have passed. 13 works of art valued at more than $500 million remain missing. None have been seen since the early morning of March 18, 1990. The reward for the recovery of the artworks in good condition is $10 million, the largest ever offered for stolen art in history. Most of the suspects are already dead. Merlino died in prison in 2005. Reisfelder and DiMuzio died in 1991. Guarente died in 2004. Gentile died in 2021. Frank Salem died in prison in 2022. Rick Abath died in 2024. David Turner is alive and free. He does not speak. The question that haunts the art world is no longer who did it. Investigators believe they know. The question that remains is, where is the art? And the most terrifying answer, perhaps nowhere. Works of art are fragile. 17th century oil paintings require specific conditions of temperature and humidity. The thieves' incompetence, the brutal cuts, the duct tape, the rough handling, damaged the works at the very moment of the theft. 35 years in unknown conditions may have completed their destruction. The possibility that The Storm on the Sea of Galilee by Rembrandt, the only seascape the master ever painted, a work that survived 357 years, may have rotted in a damp basement or been burned to eliminate evidence, is the ultimate tragedy of this crime. But the museum refuses to accept that possibility. The frames remain on the walls, restored, gilded, empty, waiting. After 22 years leading the investigation, Jeffrey Kelly stated upon retiring, "Masterpieces are often not found until generations have passed. Someone will be rummaging through an attic and find these pieces. There is always hope." Isabella Stewart Gardner built her palazzo to be eternal, to survive intact against the erosion of time, so that the beauty she gathered would remain forever. The empty frames stare at visitors like unanswered questions, and the silence that emanates from them is deafening.